Welcome to the Process Chiller Academy's second episode of our podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. We've been working through our technical challenges and trying to make this the best possible production we can. This episode is in a multicast format. In English, that means that we're producing the original content in video, and we'll be posting those videos to our YouTube channel as well as our LinkedIn page. So I'm going to be putting up some things on the screen, which obviously if you're listening in your service truck or at home, you won't be able to see, but you'll be able to click on the link in the show notes and access the video portion or this entire production in video format. But I'm going to do my best to try to explain what I'm showing people on screen. So I'm excited about this episode because my hope is we're going to get some conversation going about a real important topic I feel very passionate about. This episode is going to be a little bit different than the normal podcast plans. We're not going to be talking too much about process chillers or refrigeration. This is going to be a career conversation about options that are out there. And I'm going to ask one critical question in just a moment, and then I'd like to start up a conversation that we can have hopefully by email or on LinkedIn about this important topic. This episode is brought to you by the Process Chiller Academy resource page. We just did a major update to that. If you go here, I'm showing this on my screen here to our homepage, you'll see that there's a new resource link and there's two drop downs below it. One is for HVAC refrigeration technicians, and the one below that is for business owners. We just did a lot of work on the technician page. There's a lot of great content in there, access to podcasts, blogs. There's free course content for technical training, as well as some paid pro courses. And we've also added an affiliates area. And if you get a chance to check that out, we've got some books and we're going to be adding some new stuff in there. And it also helps support the podcast. So the question I have for this episode is it possible that we're misleading our youth with respect to the options that they have for career? And what I'm specifically talking about is the option to go to college, a regular four-year college, or go into a skilled trade school upon the time they graduate from high school. Now, before I get going on this subject, I want everybody to know out there, I don't have a problem with a four-year college. I really don't. So don't fire up my email, which I'll give out in a little bit, or send me hate mail on LinkedIn. The point of this whole episode is to discuss the viability for other options to our youth. And I want to make sure that we have this discussion. So if you have kids or you have friends that have kids, that, you know, there's some discussions about, wow, I don't think that my son or daughter is ready for a four-year college. That is the discussion I'd like to have to share with these young folks, that there's other options out there besides going to college. So I'm going to render my personal opinion here. I believe that trades in general are being stigmatized a bit in America, meaning that there's sort of a final conclusion that most parents, not all, but most parents have drilled into their kids that once they graduate high school, they need to start the college experience, whether that be go to a 2-year JC and then transferring over into a 4-year college as a junior, that type of thing. There's a lot of pressure on these students to do well in the SATs. Parents are investing a lot of money to make sure that they do well in the SATs to get into college, that kind of thing. So what I really want to get to is it's okay for young people out there that don't feel in their heart that going to a four-year college is the only way. I'm talking to the homeschoolers out there, I'm talking to the sophomores, juniors, seniors in public schools. There just needs to have a discussion, or a discussion needs to be made about this particular topic with our youth. I'm going to read a quote here by a guy named Mike Rowe. That name may sound familiar to you if you like to watch the Dirty Jobs television series, and Mike goes into some really interesting trades. The reason why he calls it Dirty Jobs because he likes to highlight the dirty jobs that go into industries that we take for granted. I remember seeing an episode about a pig farm, and I think actually that's where Mike Rowe grew up, was on a pig farm. And he was talking about, what it takes to raise these pigs and all the steps that are required to go to market. So when you go to pick up a pack of bacon, everybody just kind of just does that. You make your bacon and eggs in the morning, and you don't really put too much thought into the chickens that laid the eggs for the omelet or the pigs that went into making that bacon for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a quote by him, and then I'm going to have a little bit of discussion, starting dialogue about what he's getting at here. So the quote goes like this: I think $1 trillion of student loans and a massive skills gap, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, are precisely what happens to a society that actively promotes one form of education as the best course for the most people. I think the stigmas and stereotypes that keep so many people from pursuing a truly useful skill begin with mistaken belief that a 4-year degree is somehow superior to all other forms of learning. So again, that's a quote from Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs. So I would like to drill down on two things that Mike Rowe is talking about in this quote here. The first is the debt. And as of this recording, which is in August of 2021, the cumulative school loan debt that the students coming out of college, typically, some trade schools actually do also provide loans. So I want to be clear about that. But most of this debt is from 4-year college experiences. And as of today, we're looking at about $1.5 trillion in debt. That's with a T. That's a lot of money. So these students, when they get out of school, they're saddled with a debt right off the bat, and the average is about $50,000 in debt. And I would argue if you go into a specialty education item, doctor, lawyer, something that requires even more schooling, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. So cumulative, we're sitting at about $1.5 trillion. The other thing I want to bring up is what he calls the skills gap. And it's very, very subtle. But I think if you search your day-to-day lives, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things. First of all, I have a little homework project for you. So when you're driving around in your car at a stoplight, at a stop sign, and you're just kind of looking around, look around for these big box vans. These are the ones that have the signs on them. They might have colorful wraps on them. They'll have ladders typically strapped to the top. And just look for what it is. There'll be a HVAC refrigeration company. There'll be plumbers, electricians, you name it. Contractors in general. Could be a general building contractor. If you get a chance to pan over safely and look at who's in that driver's seat, you're going to notice that more times than not, the individual in that seat is going to be middle-aged or older. Now, yeah, that's profiling, but that's just the challenge is. The bottom line is there's not enough people going into the skills trade business, and that's causing what Mike's talking about is a skills gap. Now, the problem with that is that, talking specifically for HVAC refrigeration, if you talk to any HVAC company in the U.S., you pick up the phone book, go on Google, you name it, major city, and you were to interview the owner of that business, and I stay in contact with a lot of these guys, you're going to ask them, what's your biggest challenge? Almost never you're going to hear, my biggest challenge is finding new work, finding customers. That's almost never the issue. The issue is they can't find enough people to fill the job requirements, to fill the customer need. So what that's caused is this huge churning of technicians. They're churning from shop to shop. Typically, there's huge demand for these technicians, and I'm going to put some more numbers together for you in a minute. And you're going to see that the wages have accelerated much faster than the cost of living because of supply and demand, right? There's a big demand for HVAC refrigeration technicians, and there's not a lot of supply. So the contractors, in order to retain the technicians that are working for them, they have to pay more. I've heard even some shops getting very creative in like what athletes do in major professional sports is when they have a real hiring problem of HVAC technicians, they're offering signing bonuses. I've seen some as high here in the Northwest as $5,000 to just jump ship and come over and work for another shop, right? So that doesn't happen they're not paying that because they want to, they're paying that because they have to. The other thing you might notice is that when you need to have home services. Let's say you need to have your heating and air conditioning tuned up, ducts cleaned, whatever, services on your home that require skilled trades. You're going to find out the prices are going up, and you're also going to find out that the lead time is as well. Now, I'm even talking post-COVID pandemic. I'm talking about before all the, the drama that we've had recently. Just getting somebody out, especially during the summertime, to fix your AC system used to be just a day or so. On average now, it's at least a week and sometimes more. If you want to have a system replaced, it can take 2 or 3 weeks just to get a salesperson out. And then after that, it could take several months in order to get the install crew physically at your house. And this is happening in all the trades. I don't care if you need a plumber, an electrician to run a new circuit for your hot tub, whatever. It's just a real challenge now. So that basically highlights what the skills gap is for the professional trades. So I started this episode talking about our youth and talking about conversations to have with our youth. So that's really what I want to transition into next. We're going to look at some more numbers specific to HVAC here in a few minutes. So what I would suggest is this. Parents know, especially parents of homeschool kids, they know their kids. They know the youth that they're raising, and you kind of know from an early age if they're meant to go to college. Now, on a personal note, I'm one of those people. So when I was going through school, I didn't learn actually till I was in my 30s that I was dyslexic. So I struggled. For a long time, I thought, maybe I'm just not that smart. That wasn't the case at all after I, found out what the issue was. But it took me twice as long to study written word content than any other type of content. Once I got it in there, I was fine. But I was just one of those kids, right? And if it weren't for the fact that I just happened to stumble into a salesman trying to sell an HVAC refrigeration school down in Arizona when I was in my high school shop class, my life, I think, would have been a lot different. So it's just, I was one of those people. And I thought when I was in high school, my parents, they weren't pushing me in any particular direction, but that was the discussion that we were having. It was just, again, a natural thing that students would do. Go to a JC, and then that's what my track was go to a JC and then go to finish out in a 4-year college. So I thought about it, and before that critical day in my life, that junction, I was really kind of dreading it, to be honest with you, because I did not know my disability. I didn't have a name then. So I was thinking, wow, I'm going to have to struggle. I struggled through high school. I came out with decent grades, but I really think that it would have been hard for me if I would have went that track, right? So it was amazing for me in HVAC school because we were dealing a lot with electrical drawings and schematics, and that bypassed, I still had some struggles and some reading things, but for the most part, that bypassed the crux of my dyslexics problem. So that's just a side note. If you're interested more in my personal story, just how things can happen like that, these junctures in your life, I turned out I had it happen to me 3 times in my life that got me where I am now. If you go to our homepage at processchilleracademy.com, there's a video on the homepage of an interview that I recently did to check out. And by the way, because I got a lot of calls about this, the beautiful blonde that kissed me on the cheek before that interview, that was actually my wife, who I've been married to for over 30 years. So just to let you know. Okay, so on to some advice I would like to put out there just to start the discussion. I'm going to give a few ideas here that parents can try to have discussions with their high schoolers. I suggest somewhere in the sophomore year, definitely by the time the pressure starts coming on to do well on SATs, schools, public schools in particular, are going to, I'm not going to say pressure, but they're going to encourage. That's where the assumption starts happening, where the kids are going to be going to college. A lot of the colleges, the local ones, maybe even someone from out of state, are going to come in and try and recruit these young individuals to come in. It's a big money business, right? So when that starts happening, I suggest having a conversation with your son or daughter about there are other options out there besides a 4-year college. And what I would suggest is if you happen to have a family member, a friend that's in skilled trades, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, general contracting, whatever it is, something that's a skilled trade that's well known, see if you can set up a career day. So have your son or daughter do a ride-along with these individuals that have been at it for a while and ask questions and have conversations with your son or daughter about what kind of questions to ask. I would start with, why did you choose this skilled trade versus going to a college? What are some of the things that you like about what you're doing in this skilled trade? And then on the flip side, what are the things that that you don't like or you would really like to change if you could? So that's a good start. That's a good place to be. The next suggestion I would have is to do some research on trade schools that are in your area. Most, if you want to find out about a college, you go to Google and you put colleges in my area, you're going to get the phone book. You're going to get a lot of stuff, but you'll have to be very specific with a trade school. So start out with HVAC trade schools in my area, electrical trade schools in my area. A lot of unions will have good programs as well. Vocational stuff. Some city colleges still nowadays will teach vocational type classes. So find out what's available and then find out what the tuitions are for these schools. As I mentioned earlier, you can get financing if you think you need it for HVAC or any other trade school. Just get the facts and find out how long the program is. And here's a big one. Find out what type of placement assistance that you get. Many of the trade schools out there will offer some pretty fantastic placement program. Compared to four-year colleges, they typically don't. They do have counselors that can give you some ideas, but they're not really in the business to place their students in the industries that they've studied for. It's just, I don't know why. There are a few exceptions out there, but for the most part, once you graduate from college, it's pretty much assumed that you're going to do your own thing. You're going to have to go find your own work. That's just how it's been for quite some time. All right. So those are just a couple of ideas. I would like to give some comparisons. And again, I want to, like I said in the very beginning, I am not down on four-year colleges. I am not. I just want to have a conversation. I want parents to have conversations about other options that are out there. And the fact that, let these young folks know that they could be potentially stigmatized, that they're in the trades rather than going to a four-year college degree. But it is a viable option. So let's just do a few comparisons. So let's take a four-year college. There's a lot of ways to get there. As I mentioned earlier, you can do JC for 2 years and get your AA and all that stuff, and that's relatively inexpensive, and then transfer over to a four-year college to finish out your degree. Side note, it's very important to make sure you're smart about selecting your JC, because you have to have kind of an idea on what four-year you're going to try to get into, or four-year colleges, plural, because you want to make sure that your AA credits are transferable. Sometimes a JC, it's kind of rare these days, but sometimes getting into a four-year college, you could run into a few hiccups if a course or two that you've taken at a JC is not transferable by the four-year college. So that's something you want to make sure you check out. All right. So as I mentioned before, the average debt for a four-year college degree is around $50,000. And again, I would argue it's probably more than that, but let's just say that that's the number. I mentioned earlier about placement. So you graduate with a communications degree. You have a lot of different things you can do. That's one of the degrees I kind of like, actually, because you can do so much with it. But anyway, you graduate, you're pretty much going to be on your own. And you're going to have to be, creative on how to get yourself employed. Now, you can defer your student loans for a period of time, but you will have to pay those loans back. That's just how it is. And a lot of people, I was surprised, didn't know this, that let's say you have financial trouble and you can't pay your loan off and you've already deferred it a few times. So there's kind of an attitude out there, well, I can just file bankruptcy. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but a student loan is not subject to bankruptcies. So even if you're able to remove all of your other debt, car loans, other things like that, by declaring bankruptcy, which I never would recommend, you still have to make that college loan. So that loan has to be paid. All right. So let's say you get your four-year degree, you got yourself a job. Let's look at timelines real quick. So while you're going through college, most or many college students, situations are different for everybody, will have some kind of a side hustle going on, regardless of working for a coffee shop, restaurant, doing some type of job that helps supplement your income, so you can have some fun for your college experience, right? Most likely, unless you get an internship or something like that, you're not going to be employed in your area of specialty until after you graduate. So you're looking at anywhere between 4 and 5 years after you graduate high school. So you have a debt typically, and you have 4 years before you can actually start satisfying that debt. All right, so that's the two main things. So let's go over and apply those two main subjects to trades. So you graduate high school, you go into a trade school. I'm going to first talk about the costs of that. You can go through a trade school relatively inexpensively. Put my nephew and one of my sons through Penn Foster, which they're not a sponsor. I'm just telling you what I picked out. And it was about $1,000. It's heating, air conditioning, a little light on refrigeration, and it's all online. Okay, it's about $1,000 to go through this thing. You get a certificate. And from what I can tell, a lot of the students that go through this particular course do get decent entry-level jobs. Now, that's very, very inexpensive. I'd say if I had to average the costs out, you're probably looking between $5,000 and $10,000 and in net costs. And you can get loans for most trade schools. Okay, so let's look at the timeline. So that's the cost. Let's look at the timeline. So once you graduate high school, you go into a trade school. Shortly after graduation, once you start, you're looking at anywhere between 6 months would be minimum, and you're at it full time going to the school. I'd say average would probably be 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. So you're done with it relatively quickly. And typically, if you did well in school and you took it seriously, you're going to probably have a job either before or right at the time you graduate from your tech school. And if you don't, there's usually, as I mentioned earlier, there's placement personnel at these different colleges, most of them, technical schools, and they're going to help you get employed. So you have a lower cost education, and you get at that job quicker. So that is very interesting, because depending on how your trajectory goes in the trades, I would argue, and this is just my opinion, but if you game it all out and you look at larger debt starting work later versus lower cost and debt versus starting work sooner, there's the trades will actually run ahead of income coming from the 4-year college degree, typically. And again, there's exceptions to every single rule, but I have seen that over and over and over. Now, of course, over the lifetime, the college degree people tend to move ahead in income where the trades tend to lag. However, I'm going to introduce some proven things that I've done for people that have worked for me over the years that make it possible to actually exceed way past what the averages are. And I'm going to look at that here in a couple of minutes. So a little bit ago, I mentioned that we're going to talk about the numbers. And I want to share one resource that I highly recommend that parents out there that are doing research even before they speak with their sons and daughters about other options on careers. There's a website that I'd highly recommend checking out. And I'm gonna put that up on my screen right now. Now again, this is a multicast, so obviously if you're riding around in your service truck or at home, you're not gonna see what I'm putting up. I'm gonna try to verbalize what I'm looking at here, but I'd suggest that you pop into the show notes on this podcast and go to the actual video on our YouTube channel or our LinkedIn page and check this video out, because there's some really interesting stats here. So what I'm looking at here is a web page from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And of course, I'm an HVAC refrigeration guy, so I've pulled up the code 49-9021. I think if you Google that, you may find that it'll come up. But anyway, it's the heating and air conditioning and refrigeration mechanics and installers. Mechanics is basically another word for the service people, the repair people. I don't know why they call them mechanics, but anyway, I digress. This page is like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information on here. I'm going to highlight a couple of things that are germane to the conversation here. So this first box here that you see at the top of the page, it talks about the total employees, total people working in the industry in the United States. So we got 344,020. Now this is as of May 2020. This survey is updated approximately every 2 years. So pretty current stuff. The next one should probably come out, I'm guessing, 2022. So 344,020. The other thing is the average mean wage is $25.68 per hour, or a total gross wage, probably the W-2 before benefits, $53,410. Okay. Now we're just kind of file that away in your brain for a minute. I'm going to kind of punch some holes in that here in a little bit. But anyway, if you scroll down here, you're going to see there's so many statistics in here. I could spend a whole hour just going over all this stuff. But the area I like in particular, because I'm dyslexic, is the map. So there's maps, several maps of the United States on this page, and it breaks down the wages for technicians by state. So this is kind of cool. So you can see the number of people by state, what the average mean wages are, what their gross wages are. It just gives a ton of data. And the maps are all color-coded. The one I think is kind of interesting is there's one about the third map down. It's in blue, different shades of blue. And what stood out for me is, let's just pick California and Washington State. So those two are dark blue. There's a bunch of other states that are dark blue as well. But the mean annual income for the dark blue states on this map is $56,660 to $79,630. So what you'll notice is that wages can vary quite a bit in the United States, and that's all income levels and all occupations. That's nothing new. But what's cool about this is that if let's say your son or daughter lives in New Mexico, where the maximum wage is $46,300, and they've always talked about moving to California or Washington State or Oregon, where I'm at, they can look on here and see where the wage bases are. And the cool thing, as I mentioned earlier, if you get out of a trade school and you've done well and you've got your certificate, especially so you have the school certificate, and then you've also done the additional requirement for your Section 608, which is for handling of refrigerants. You have all that lined out. You had a clean driving record. You can pretty much drive into any major market and most likely have a job before you get there, right? You could set up a job, get an offer before you actually relocate. I've even heard some of these larger contractors, they'll actually pay for your relocations in addition to the signing bonuses. So there's a lot of demand, right? So this page is really helpful. I recommend that you check it out. And I will put a link on the show notes to this particular page. But if your son or daughter, let's say they do that ride along and they go out and they meet with, one of their relatives is an electrician, there's going to be an area for electricians as well. So you can get a lot of great data off this particular webpage. I'd recommend checking it out. So a little bit ago, I kind of teased on how to do more, how to take your career and supercharge it, as I always say, and move ahead of the rest of the pack in the specialty trades. And I'm talking specifically for HVAC and refrigeration. So I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast our resource page, and if you go to the HVAC technician page, scroll down just a little bit here. I'm putting this up on my screen here now, and I'll also put a link to this page on the show notes. But if you scroll down and you see a video there, I talk about what I call the best tech process. So the word BEST, the first letters of each one of those words mean something. So I put it into a pyramid, and this is something that I came up with decades ago. And I've been blessed to be in this business over 30 years. And I promise this won't turn into a story of my life, but I've trained a lot of technicians when I had an HVAC company, as well as when I went into HVAC refrigeration manufacturing. Training has always been a big deal to me. So I've developed this training concept, this best tech pyramid, what I call the career success pyramid. over years. And I'm pleased to say that many of the technicians that chose to stay in the industry, because some of them didn't, either ended up owning their own businesses, which some of them are making 2, 3, 4, 500,000 a year, or they stayed working in the service trucks doing actual physical repairs. Several of them are facilities people now, and they're doing well. Some of them, actually most of them, I would say, are into the six figures. 125, 130, 150,000 with amazing benefit packages. So something to keep in mind. So at the very bottom of the pyramid that you'll see in this video, I have the letter T. So that's the last letter in the word best, right? So T stands for technical excellence. So what I do is I get into what technical excellence is, and I'm going to tell you right up front, it is not just the going to the trade school or apprenticeship program or whatever and getting your certificate or turning out as a union journeyman, whatever. I'm not talking about that. That's just the baseline. What I'm talking about is technical excellence is getting a learning mentality and making consistent and earnest efforts for continued education. Now, I'm going to give you two examples of what I'm talking about. So the first one is process chillers, right? Process Chiller Academy. No surprise I'm talking about that, right? So process chillers is a niche within a niche. So the HVAC refrigeration world, that's a big niche, a specialty trade niche. And then process chillers is a niche within that niche. So it's very, very specialized. So there's not very many technicians out there that specialize out of that 344,000. The number of technicians that specialize in process chillers is very, very low. Now, that's good for the technician, but you have to make the investments in it. Now, there's very few, and this is the reason why I got into this business, there's very few apprenticeship programs and online learning that actually focus on process chillers. And the scope of process chiller market is huge. Breweries, distilleries, wineries, MRIs, if anybody's ever had an MRI, every MRI that's in the United States has to have a process chiller. That's just a fact. Lasers, linear accelerators for cancer therapy. I mean, it goes on and on. A lot of data centers use chillers as well. So if you make an investment in that particular training, what you've done is you've made this pool that you're competing with, 344,000, much, much smaller. So you may be competing with 10 or 15,000. So inherently what that's going to do, if you have that specialty skill, A, your work is going to be a lot more secure, and B, you're going to be probably making a little bit more money, if not a lot more money. So that's just that example. One other one I want to give you is building automation. Building automation has exploded in the last decade, mainly because of energy efficiency requirements, right? So you hear about this all the time, global warming, the Green New Deal. The politicians love talking about efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. That's all they're talking about these days. Well, not all, but it's a lot. The environment's a big deal. So states like California are adopting all electric concepts, meaning that where they used to use gas and other, natural gas and things like that to heat buildings, they're going to electric. Now, here's the thing. On a building, a lot of people don't know this, most of the energy consumption into a commercial industrial building goes into the HVAC refrigeration or climate control area, right? So you take the percentage of all the cost to run a building, keeping that building hot and cold, or warm and cold is most of that cost. So what they found is building automation can be used to really control those expenses. And building automation actually goes way outside HVAC as well. Lighting. So for example, when you walk into a bathroom, a lot of times there's sensors, but a lot of times that building automation systems will manage lighting as well. So it's just kind of a big thing. So like I said before, in process chillers, if you were to spend some time with your employer going through a building automation school, learning how to do programming, learning how to do the graphics, learning how to design building automation systems, that type of thing, again, you're making the pond out of that 344,000 smaller as far as who you have to compete with. And again, you'll have less competition, so there's the supply and demand factor. So your income level and your demand will go up. You'll have more options. That's what I'm getting to in the best tech concept, technical excellence. If you can do that, you're going to find that the sky's the limit. The opportunities that you will have will just be absolutely amazing. And I can tell you firsthand, I've been super blessed by just that one thing alone. So something to keep in mind. Check out Best Tech. If you go, I'm showing this screenshot again here. If you go down a little bit on the page, you'll notice that there's a sign up for a 5-day Best Tech concept email course, totally free. Just give us your name and your email, and I promise we never give away your email address. You get what you're supposed to get, and if you get anything you don't want to get, you can unsubscribe, no BS at any time. So I'd suggest you check that out, because I get into the entire concept of the career success pyramid. The technical excellence that I just explained is just one of them, right? All right, so that wraps things up. Let's get the conversation going. I'm always on LinkedIn. Send me a message. You'll see the video portion of this on LinkedIn as well as our YouTube channel. Please, if you can, click like. If you happen to watch this in a video format, it's super important, and it makes this content accessible to more people. Tweaks the algorithm, I guess, or whatever they say. And look me up. If there's anything that you have issue with what I brought up in this particular episode, please make sure and email me at mking@processchilleracademy.com. I'd like to keep the conversation going, because this is an important thing. We have to get more people into these trades, or it's going to get real challenging. The demand continues to rise, and we need to have our youth consider that there's other options. That I'm not saying they're better or worse, but there's other options. So let's get the conversation going with these kids. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day. And please keep an eye out for our future podcasts.